Living Corporate is brought to you by Pfizer. Every day, Pfizer colleagues work across developed and emerging markets to advance wellness, prevention, treatments, and cures that challenge the most feared diseases of our time. For more than 170 years, Pfizer has worked to make a difference for all of those who rely on them. Learn more at Pfizer.com. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and oh my goodness, welcome to 2023. We are outside, as it were. I am so excited about so many of the things that are coming to Living Corporate in 2023. I'm excited about our guests. I'm excited about our partnerships. I'm excited about some new features on our website and our job board. I'm excited about just some of our new brand partnerships and things that we're just going to be launching and announcing as the year goes on. I'm thankful to each and every one of you who listen to Living Corporate, who continue to help us grow. Last year, we reached a milestone of over 1 million downloads, and that doesn't happen without a few things. One, it doesn't happen without an incredibly consistent team and a hardworking group of people, right? So I want to shout out to the Living Corporate team. I want to shout out to long-standing contributors to the Living Corporate podcast flagship show that really, again, we wouldn't have it without them. And then I want to, of course, thank y'all, right? It's because of y'all who continue to show up and listen every single week to Living Corporate. And then, of course, to the additional extended network of shows across our network that we're able to grow and going to continue to grow well beyond 1 million downloads. But I just want y'all to know that, like, I do track the numbers. I see what's going on. I want to thank y'all. You know, as we think about this year, we're going to continue to be bold. We're going to continue to unabashedly, unapologetically center the voice of employees. There's plenty of brands out there that focus on the voice of the corporate executive, and those brands have value. Like, I want to be very clear. It's just that Living Corporate, we're never going to prioritize the corporate voice. We're just not. Like, there's plenty of institutions and mechanisms out there that do just that. There aren't as many institutions out there that really center and amplify historically oppressed voices. And that's just where we're going to be. We're not deviating from that in any way. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to feature brands, but even if you notice we feature brands, we're talking about those employee experiences, and we're not trying to really pull any punches about it. You're also going to hear, as we continue to record content this year at Living Corporate, you're going to hear my daughters. You're going to hear Amon, who's my youngest, and you're going to hear Emery, who is about to be 3 years old, y'all. She turns 3 this year. And so, you know, I'm excited. You're going to hear probably more and more evidence of growth, not just to Living Corporate. That's right. That's right, Amon. You're going to hear evidence of growth, not just to Living Corporate, but of, like, just my life. And I plan on doing more vignettes, honestly, of just, like, my own personal perspective, where I'm at with certain things, more just kind of like probably like deconstructed shows where there's not always going to be a guest. I want to shout out to Shanisha, aka Dr. White. I want to shout out to Amy C. Wanaker. I want to shout out to Tristan. I want to shout out to Neil, Brittany. I want to shout out to the break room, who's on a bit of a break themselves, the Access Point. I want to shout out to our entire network of creators, not just on the flagship, but again, on our extended podcast. And I want to shout out Vonda Page on the group chat. I'm just really appreciative. Aaron, our writing team. I want to shout out to Madison and all the folks who show love for us. I want to shout out to Textio and Doximity, Pfizer, what's up? I want to shout out to Cam. There's just a lot going on. You're going to hear a lot of gratitude this year. And if it's not about love and growth, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm probably not going to really be too much on it, right? Like 2023, there's just too much to be thankful for. There's too much to be grateful for. There's too much to be excited for. This next episode you're going to be hearing is a conversation with myself and the Dr. Janice Gassam. We talk about her journey in the DEI space. We talk about her work in the higher ed space. We talk about her personal DEI consulting firm, as well as her newsletter. Make sure you click the link in the show notes to learn more about Dr. Gassam and her incredible work on and off of Forbes. And listen, we're going to get to this interview. You're going to hear a couple of things, a couple of other announcements from us, and then I'll see you in a minute, all right? Janice Gassam. How you doing?
I'm good, Zach. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing pretty well. You know, you and I were just talking off mic about just family, things changing, expanding. You know what I mean? You know, I feel like the last time we spoke, you know, first of all, you're a friend of the show. Like, you've been on for a while. I think it's a good time to like talk a little bit about and pause and observe this moment that we're in, where, you know, we're 2 years post the murder of George Floyd, and organizations discovering all this money for diversity, equity, inclusion, hiring a bunch of folks, bringing in consulting firms, bringing in speakers, to now is looking down. We're in a working recession right now, but looking at, you know, increased economic anxieties, and we're looking at organizations slash their budgets left and right. What are you seeing right now as it pertains to DEI and organizational investment in DEI? And shoot, we're going to talk a little bit about your pivot from academia, but I guess before we do that, like, I really want to just get your perspective on the DEI landscape right now with all of the economic anxieties happening for organizations.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because the last time we spoke, it was much different. Companies were doling out a lot of money and pouring it into DEI, but we're in a period of transition right now where we are, I think, technically in a recession in this moment. And a lot of companies are laying people off, right? We're seeing mass layoffs. I know that a lot of tech companies have been laying people off. And so DEI goes to the bottom of the to-do list, or the importance, the list of priorities, right? And so I am seeing a lot of companies coming back and saying, you know, we just don't have the budget for this, right? Whereas there was more willingness to invest in diversity education and in anti-racism sort of education and consulting. I have seen this sort of change and shift that has happened, where it's like, okay, we've talked about Black people for the last 2 years. We're kind of getting tired now, and we're getting fatigued. So can we get back to what we were talking about before? So I have seen that, but I think it's important to keep our foots on the proverbial necks of organizations and institutions, because we can't let up and let things go back to the way that they were before.
You know, it's interesting, like, to that point, because I do sense that. I also sense there's this pressure to really get off of like Black identity and really kind of broaden it up a bit, right? So less on, hey, Black experience at work, or even Black women, and getting more to like the generalized women of color, or even just women. I'm seeing less conversations around even holding brands accountable to those pledges that they made a couple years ago, right? Like, when you say, you know, keeping pressure up on leadership organizations, what does that look like from your perspective? Because the reason I ask is because it feels like there's only so much that Black and brown diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders can do, because they ultimately aren't in control. So, like, what tactics have you seen work or be effective?
I think that's a great question. I am all for social media call-outs. You know, I know that there are two schools of thought. A lot of people aren't fans of quote-unquote cancel culture. I do think when it comes to like celebrities and individuals, canceling people, and I'm, you know, I know right now, this moment we're in, there's a celebrity in particular I'm thinking about that's been wilding out. And, you know, the question is, should we cancel him or should we not? But I think with celebrities, it's different than brands. I do think cancel culture, calling companies out online, I do think impacts them and makes them more accountable, because nobody wants to lose money, right? And think about the moment that we're in right now, where you're already laying people off, right? I just saw that Nike is discounting their products, right? Because they have I think they have more inventory than they thought they would, so they're discounting products. And, I think inevitably what this means is that there will be layoffs, right? Because if you have to discount products, you want more people to go out and buy your things. And so I think that, it's really important that we are keeping companies accountable. And so many companies like the Nikes and the Snapchats and all these organizations are losing profits, right? Just because of COVID and what's happening in the world. And so they can't stand to, and they're not in a position right now, especially where bad press and publicity would be a good thing for them, right? I think with Starbucks, for example, in 2018, when, they were in the midst of that situation where the manager in Philadelphia called the police on those two black men, and Starbucks went viral. They shut down stores. They did the unconscious bias trainings. Starbucks did bounce back, right? I think that their profits were low for following that incident in 2018, but they bounced back 4 years later.
Right.
But we weren't in a period of recession then, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, we're in a very vulnerable, and companies are in a very precarious position. And so I think that it's so important right now that we use technology and social media to hold companies accountable. People are going onto Glassdoor. I saw at the top of this year, LinkedIn saw such a vast number of users, right? More than ever before, because people are on LinkedIn looking for jobs, posting jobs, searching for jobs. So more people are using platforms like LinkedIn. And I think that calling companies out who are not holding true to these values and the black squares that they posted I think the power is in the hands of the people now more than ever. So I think social media is such a powerful tool for that. And I think that what we saw a few years ago with the Facebook employees, I think it was Facebook, where there were black and brown employees who anonymously posted on LinkedIn or on Medium. They had this anonymous Medium document where they were sharing their experiences, right? There's power in that, where even you can speak in anonymity now with reporters and with journalists and talk about your experiences. And so I think that the power of social media and technology, we have to really lean into when it comes to holding companies accountable.
There's so much there, because I think about and I've said this before, is there's just a limit to what internal DEI can accomplish without externalized pressures. Right? The whole reason that we saw that investment after the murder of George Floyd was because of all of the Black Lives Matter protests. A bunch of folks got whole new careers because of people protesting around the world. It was a global phenomenon. I think I'm curious about even something else you said about cancel culture is I don't know if there's anyone that we've really seen be canceled, Dr. Gassam. Who's you got Louis C.K. who wasn't canceled. He's still making money. He's on the road. You got people talking about Will Smith's going to get canceled. Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Will Smith has a movie coming out, later, this quarter. So I think the word, to your point, is really just accountability. Hey, you did something that wasn't right, and we're going to talk about it in the public square. We're not, no one's really had much taken away. And then also, I think also, if someone takes something away from you for something that you've done, that's not you being canceled. That's you being held accountable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that, to your point, I think it's hard to cancel people. I think it's very easy to cancel companies. And I think Abercrombie and Fitch is a great example where they repeatedly, right? I don't know if you watched the documentary on Netflix. If not, you need to watch it. It's really, really good, right? Okay. Super fascinating. That looks at how Abercrombie treated their employees over the years. And though they were I'm a millennial, and I remember all of the kids at school, all of the white kids at my school anyway, had Abercrombie. It was like the thing to wear. And I don't know, I never wore it, but I was like, oh, it's so cool, right?
Yeah.
They saw so much success. And through that success, there was a lack of accountability and there was a lack of focus on equity and inclusion, right? They repeatedly found themselves in situations where the CEO himself said, I don't make my clothes for fat people, right? I make my clothes for the all-American, which is just like a dog whistle or a code word for like white, slim white, like people, right?
Right.
And so they were sued for religious discrimination because they refused to hire a woman because she had a hijab. So they have so many issues over the decades. And I think at the point that they are at right now, I think Abercrombie is just not seeing success. I think they've been permanently canceled. I don't think anyone really wears their clothes, even though they are. I saw them in the mall the other day and I was like, I didn't even know this was still around.
I did not know Abercrombie was still around.
I think Victoria's Secret is also a good example. They've found themselves in a lot of hot water where there was cultural appropriation happening at their fashion shows. The executives at Victoria's Secret said that they don't make their lingerie for trans people, for fat people. So they've said a lot of derogatory things. So I think it's 100% possible to cancel a company, but I think that I don't want to say it's impossible, but I agree with you that I don't think any person is truly ever canceled. But I think that companies that repeatedly behave badly, because we're in an era where, especially here in the US, people are so smart. And it's like, if you don't want to shop at Starbucks because they did something derogatory, there's a million other coffee companies, right? In the New York City area, Dunkin' Donuts there's more Dunkin' Donuts locations than Starbucks. So like we have so many options, right?
Yeah.
And so like if you're not in a industry where your company has a monopoly, right? Like I think a company like Apple would be very difficult for people to boycott, right? I've talked about this with my students before, where I'm like, unless you're like an Apple, right? Or you're like an internet company in a particular area where you have a monopoly, like there's competition everywhere, right? Yeah. Whatever you make or you create, somebody can duplicate and may do it better, right? 100%. So I think that companies are not in a position where they can afford to, like, literally and figuratively, they cannot afford to like not prioritize equity, right? So that makes me happy to think about the fact that people will not support organizations and institutions that don't treat people well.
Yeah, I love that. And I will say, I think that I agree with that too, is that we've definitely seen brands go the way of the dinosaur when they mess up real bad. So that's super true, right? Like, and I think social media, like to your point, it also like it can accelerate accountability in that way. And it's also, I think, easier to like bash or like to like come down on a brand because it's a brand. So it's not, we know it's not a human being. You know what I mean? Like it's easier, I think, for people emotionally to detach themselves as opposed to, again, like a comedian or an actor or a musician or something like that nature. Okay. So now, Dr. Gassam, again, last time you were on, we were talking about, some of the work that you've done, and really like the spaces you inhabit as a contributing writer for Forbes, as a professor in academia. We've talked about like academia, and existing in the ivory as a Black woman. Since we last spoke though, you've been making some pivots and some career changes. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like what led to the decision to leave academia and really like pursue your own shop and set up your own shingle? What was the draw for that?
Yeah, I'll be, I'm always honest with you, Zach, but I'll be like super duper transparent. I mean, I feel like academia, like any other industry, is really like holding on to their white supremacist cultural norms and values, right? And I think that people have this idea that academia is super progressive, right? Because it's like, ooh, we teach kids about, and we teach people about all of these super interesting and quote unquote radical topics. But there is, as a Black professor specifically in academia, I think that academia is a violent and unsafe place for us, right? As the only Black woman in my department, I felt like it was not an environment that allowed me to grow and to thrive. There was an incident that happened in 2020 where some students complained about me, and they said they weren't learning in my course. And, I spoke to the program director about it. He's super nice guy, white male. And I explained to him, the way that I teach, right, is basically like something called the Socratic method, where I assign students reading and I pose questions in class about the reading. And we talk about these questions for further analysis. And he said to me, Zach, wow, that's like the exact same way I teach, right? I wonder why they have a problem with you.
Come on.
And when he said that, I was like, wow, like you really don't know the difference, right? I look younger than I am. So I'm in the classroom. These students already don't see me as a professor because I'm not an old white man, right? I look younger than I am. I look like I'm in my 20s. I'm a Black woman, right? And so it's like, you don't know why they see me differently, right? And so when they what happened was right before COVID, they took a class away from me, and their excuse was like, oh, students feel like they're not learning. I was a full-time faculty member at this university, and I'll never forget this, the words that this person used to tell me what the students said. She was like, I asked them, have they spoken to you about the way that they feel? And they said that they were scared.
Wow.
Right? They were scared to talk to me. And anyone that knows me knows, I think one of my character traits is I think the word is affable. I think I'm very extroverted. I leave my office door open. I'm very talkative and chatty. And I think that I try to cultivate a space where people feel safe. People are able to talk to me. I had a student who was like in my office for a few hours crying, telling me about her experiences with her mother-in-law, right? I don't think that I'm a standoffish or introverted person.
Yeah.
And so that was really shocking to hear that these students felt like they were too scared to talk to me, right? And so I think that all of that is coded language for you're a Black woman and they don't feel safe with you, right?
Right.
And so there were other incidents that happened since that, incident. And I just was starting to feel like after the murder of George Floyd, I reached out to one of my Black students who's also a cop. And I said, how are you feeling? And he's like, Professor, you're the first person that asked me at this university how I'm feeling, right? And he was the only Black guy in his program. And that really I just was like, wow, so Black students don't feel like this is safe for them. Me as a Black professor, I don't feel like this is a safe space for me. And I gave it some time. And I was like, maybe things will change. I tried to help them change. I spoke with the consultant that they hired to tell them exactly what I think they should do. And they didn't do any of that, right? And I found out I was being underpaid. I inquired about it with HR. They were paying me, right, $85,000. They were supposed to be paying me based on my salary range.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be starting at $112,000.
Wow.
So they were underpaying me almost $30,000. And when I asked them why, they didn't have an answer. They just said, we want to get everybody into their salary range by 2023. So I said, you know what? I'm going to see. This was November when I found out I was being underpaid, November of 2021.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to see how I feel by June. And if I still feel the same way, I'm submitting my resignation. So essentially, it was just not a safe environment, not an inclusive environment. And I feel like I don't know what's really going to change academia because I see what happened with Nicole Hannah-Jones.
Yes.
And I see what has happened with Cornel West. And it's like, these are famous and notable people, Pulitzer Prize winning writers that are experiencing this. I'm just a black woman, I'm just a black woman teaching, and so I felt like it wasn't an environment that would allow me to grow. So I said, I'm going to just quit and focus on my consulting business. And I'm so happy that I made that decision.
Let's talk a little bit about like the conversation and your exit. Like if you're open to sharing, like what did that part look like as it pertains to like sharing the decision? Hey, I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. Like, were they surprised? Did you like talk to me more about like how you navigated that discussion, if there was a discussion at all?
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great question. And I'm such a firm believer, Zach, in transparency, because I do think that there's a lot of secrecy around things. I think I'm always transparent about salary and pay because a lot of us are being underpaid. Probably most of us are being underpaid in our jobs. And I think part of it is we have to be more comfortable sharing things like that. So I'm always open with that. I knew that in last year, like after George Floyd, I wanted to quit, right? Because I was like, I'm splitting my focus. I'm teaching full time. So I'm teaching a 7-course load. I'm working 10 months out of the year teaching 7 classes. And sometimes I was asked to teach extra classes. And I'm doing 3 to 4 workshops every single week for corporations. Mm-hmm. I'm working with companies to consult. And it was just a lot for me to handle. And I knew that after George Floyd, I was like, I want to focus on my business. But my partner was like, you should tough it out and just don't make any rash decisions. And my insurance was amazing, right? I had amazing educators have really good health insurance and I had really amazing insurance. And that was what I was worried about, right? I was just like, I don't, thank God I don't have any like major sort of health concerns, but I was worried about insurance. That's why I stayed. And, I stayed and I told my partner in November of last year, I was like, if I still feel this way, I'm leaving in 2022 because I can't keep doing this. And, so I had a conversation with my manager, and she emailed me to join the DEI committee at the university. She didn't know that I was already on the committee since 2019. And I decided not to continue being on the committee because I made suggestions and no one listened to my suggestions. I was being ignored. So I was like, oh, this committee is very performative. I don't want to join it. So she said, hey, Janice, I told so-and-so that you would be part of the DEI committee. I just wanted to let you know. And I was like, so you volunteered me without asking me? And she's like, oh, I know that DEI is your thing. I don't get why it's a problem. And I said, well, I was already on the committee for the last 2.5 years and it's a useless committee. No one's listening. And she asked for clarification. And she said, well, what happened? Why do you feel this way? I told her. And she said, can you speak to she wanted me to speak to her manager about that. Spoke with her manager, and her manager said, can you speak with an external consultant that we hired, right? No, I swear. They were like, can you speak with, mind you, I'm just telling all the tea and all their business because I think this is important for context, but they hired a white-led external consultancy, and that was issue number 1, right?
Right.
But the consultant I spoke with, I was so happy when I saw that it was a Black woman. I told her, I don't want to join this committee. These are the 11 things that this university has done to make me feel like I'm not included. And I hope you can take this feedback and bring it to them and use it to help better the university. So she told me to come back and give this feedback again at the university while they were doing a feedback day.
All of this is work. All of this is work that you're not getting paid for.
All of this is additional work on top of the 8 or 9 classes I teach in a school year. I'm being asked to do additional work that I do for a living for free, right? So I was like, okay, I'm fine with helping, doing this, doing that. And then one day I was in my office and my manager had asked to speak with me. She's like, can we schedule a chat? I said, sure. So imagine my surprise. One day she comes to my office and she's like, hey, I was just going to my office and I see that you're here. Can we chat now? And I was already annoyed because I feel like we should allot time to have a conversation if you're worried about how I feel and whether this environment is
all
inclusive
that.
to me.
Yes.
She had her phone in her hand and was carrying some books and was like scrolling on her phone. And she asked me to explain. And she said, I noticed you've been disengaged. And I said, yeah, I've been disengaged because 2.5 years ago, y'all took a class away from me. And Zach, her exact words were, I thought you were over that. Like,
over that?
She was genuinely shocked that happened in March of 2020. Like, why are you still, I didn't know that was an issue. And I said, of course that's an issue. You took a class away from me because of the word of 4 or 5 students. You had no conversation with me about that, and you took the student's word over mine. So how do you think that made me feel? So she was like, she felt so bad. She was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you felt this way. So I thought that maybe she would have an inkling. This was in April of this year. I thought she would have an inkling, like, I'm getting ready to leave, right? At that point, I had already written my resignation letter.
Yeah.
And so she spoke with someone else, and he randomly invited me to lunch. This is someone in the university that's we've never had like full conversations.
Yeah.
He's like, let's grab lunch. I thought it was weird, but I figured she told him. So he was asking all these invasive questions, how I'm feeling, who, what my partner does for work, all of these things, like, so we had that conversation. And then I knew that, like, once they send me the contract, every year they send me, I wasn't tenure track. So every year they just renew my contract. So I knew that around May, June, they send me my contract. And when they send me my contract, I'll tell them that, I'm leaving. I'll give my resignation letter.
Okay.
So they sent the contract in May, and I didn't want to sign it because I was teaching a summer course until July. So I said, I'm not signing a new contract if I'm teaching a summer course. I'll wait until I'm done the summer course, then I'll give my resignation letter.
Yeah.
So they sent me a contract in May, and in July, when I finished, the HR manager followed up and said, hey, we need your contract, right? Mm. So I said, okay. She emailed me that, and I said, I'm going to go to campus, take my office key, and clear my office, right? And so what I did, Zach, was I went on a Thursday night when I knew that no one would be on campus because it was the summertime, right?
Right.
So I didn't want to be moving stuff. No one knows I'm leaving. So I think when you're getting ready to make your exit, do what you feel safest doing. If that means coming at an odd hour to clear your office, if you know you're leaving, do that, right? So I cleared my office, and then I came back and I said, Friday morning, I'm going to go to campus, give my key, and give my laptop. And after I come back home, then I'm going to submit my resignation letter. So the Friday morning, I gave my office key, and the administrative assistant was like shocked, right? I didn't know her name, but I guess she knew me, of course, the only Black woman in the department. Oh, so I said, I want to give my office key back. She's like, I was like, do you need my name? She's like, Janice, right? I was like, yeah. And she looked so shocked and confused. Well, she went and immediately emailed the head of HR, right? So before I even had a chance to give my laptop back, the head of HR had emailed me a very like condescending email. And she was like, she's like, I heard you gave your key back. Is your intention to leave? Common courtesy would be to give a letter. I'll reach
through this email. Y'all got me. What? Y'all literally common courtesy.
Like, am I a child? Am I a child that I don't know how, like, corporate, this isn't corporate, but I know how workplaces operate.
Yeah.
I'm not a child for you to tell me, like,
how I need to behave.
Should do and what is right. I was like, in my head, I was like, I had this letter written since February of 2022. So, the letter is coming, right?
Yeah.
So I saw that email. I returned my laptop. I waited till I got home, and I responded to her email. And I said, I already returned my laptop. Thank you for the email. Here is my resignation letter. And it was honestly, Zach, it was like a 4-page letter that ended up being like 5 pages. I CC'd the head of HR, the president of the university, the tech support department, so they knew I returned my laptop, and all my managers. And I just logged out, right? And I got notifications that employees from the university were like viewing my LinkedIn page. I know that a lot of them were shocked, to be honest, because they're probably like, why would this Black woman turned down $112,000. Like, she's in a recession. How silly is this? I'm sure that's what they were thinking, right? But that was essentially what led up to, I think they were surprised. I know that it was like, it left them in a precarious position because I was the one teaching the DEI course in the HR department.
Okay.
But I was like, you know what? If your HR students, and Zach, these are graduate students, right? These aren't even like undergrads. These are graduate students who will be working in HR, and they don't even have the ability to speak with their professor, to tell their professor, hey, we don't feel like we're being stimulated in your course. We don't feel like we're learning. Like, if these are how the future HR professionals will operate. They can't even resolve an issue amongst themselves. Like, so how do you think they're going to be operating as HR professionals in your company? That is actually very scary to me. So I was like,
it's terrifying.
I could not continue in that environment. So I'm sad because I loved teaching. I get messages from some of my, what would have been students, who say, I'm so sad that you're not teaching this DEI course because we heard about you and we would have loved to have you. And I'm just like, well, that's what happens. Like, the students are ultimately the ones that end up suffering because of this toxic university environment.
The Antigen podcast returns with a 3-part miniseries spotlighting maternal immunization. When it comes to vaccine development, there's been a shifting paradigm. Help protect pregnant women and their infants through research rather than from research. Join us this season to dive deeper into this topic, the history, challenges, innovations, and exciting developments to come. Subscribe and listen to The Antigen, powered by Pfizer, on your favorite podcast app. 100%. I mean, first of all, I want to pause and acknowledge, like, the strength it takes to exit, right? Because, we Black folks, historically, especially particularly Black women, are often in the most oppressed position, the most disadvantaged position. And like, yeah, you could say, well, you should just quit. But it's like, yeah, but what do I do? Because like, yes, I'm not fully whole in this position, but to go from partial to zero is hard. It's like I can let me hold on to this partial and I can fight for whole. And the fact that you said, no, I reject the premise and I'm going to just exit this situation, I think is incredible. I think like what my question.
Thank you, Zach.
You're welcome. I think also, you and I, we texted off mic, right? Like you had some fun in exiting, right? Quitting is fun.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's almost like when you quit on your own terms, nothing is more liberating, right? I've seen few things are more liberating in the workplace than quitting on your own terms, right? Not being pushed out, not being quietly fired, which, who knows, maybe I was being quietly fired, but quitting on your own terms is such a liberating thing. And I do have to acknowledge that it is a privilege that that I was in a financial position where I was generating income from the university, even though I was being underpaid. Yep. I was able to save up like 6 months worth of expenses, right? And I was in a good financial position because I also had a business, right? Where I was actually making more money in my business than I was as a professor, right? So I was able to save up a considerable amount of money before I left. But I know that many people listening may not be there yet or may not be in a position where they can leave. But I think that few things are more liberating than being able to leave a toxic environment on your own terms.
100%. I mean, I can think about times like the last place, the last consulting firm I quit, and I left on my own terms, Dr. Gassam. Man.
Did you give a resignation letter, or you were just like, yo, I'm out?
Did I? I wrote an email to the CEO.
Wow.
Yeah, shout out Tim Ryan. And
wow. I love that we dropping names and we're just like not like tiptoeing around. We're just
like let's just have the conversation.
Things for what they
call it for what it is. Look, I dropped the email to Tim Ryan, and then dropped a resignation, like a quote unquote farewell email to like all of my, pretty much like all the leadership more, and they weren't all my managers because consulting is different, but basically all the leaders in my direct environment, so to speak. You know what I mean? So like, it was really satisfying because it was my last day. Like I exited it. I didn't give my personal email. I didn't say, hey, we'll talk later. None of that. I just left. And then like, you know, for all the people that I was cool with, like they already knew I was leaving, right? So it wasn't, you know, we didn't have to do any of that, you know, song and dance of like, hey, just letting you know, like it wasn't nothing like that. You know, it felt so nice because it was closing a chapter on a really toxic and harmful space. And like, I'm gonna tell you something, Dr. Gassam, is like as self-absorbed as this is gonna sound. I'm gonna tell you, every now and then, like since I left, that was like what, 2 years ago almost. I'll open that email up and I'll read that resignation letter. I do.
Right? And it's so like one of these days, I think I would love to post that resignation letter somewhere.
I swear.
And read it.
Yes. I'm surprised you don't post it on Forbes.
Right. Well, so with Forbes, I can't really speak a lot about my personal experiences. I have to kind of talk in third person.
Okay.
And so like there's so many things I would want to like post and share and but I can't really speak from my own perspective. But, you know, I also didn't want to feel like I don't know. I don't want to say I'm a hypocrite. I miss teaching, right? I miss the students. I don't miss academia. And I think that the happy medium for me is adjuncting, right? Like the university asked me, there's a different department that I was teaching in as well, right? The department where I got my degree from is industrial organizational psychology.
Yeah.
I was teaching in that department and they asked me to adjunct, right? Because I was teaching full-time in the business school and I miss teaching, right? I miss teaching. I think the happy medium is adjuncting, but adjuncting isn't like actually changing the environment, right? I'm just kind of saying, I don't want to be exhausted and worn down by that environment. But it makes me feel so good to like read that and be like, oh, I went in that letter, Zach. I was like, I had to take some things out because I was like, this is not relevant. But you know, when you're in like a disagreement with someone and you're just like remembering things and you're like, and receipts. Another thing.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, and another thing, right? Like there was someone in that university who actually, a white male who used the N-word. And I had that in my letter initially. It had nothing to do with my desire to leave. It was just kind of like, why is he using this, right? Because he was saying, he's from Quebec, and he was saying people from Quebec in Canada were treated like Black people in America are. And so he used the N-word when he was telling me a story. And I just was like, this is so odd. Why would you say that to me? Yeah. Right. And so I just was like, you know, and I put that in my letter initially, and then I reread it. I sent it to a friend, and he's like, Janice, that letter was intense. And I reread it, and I took that out because I was like, that's neither here nor there, but I just wanted to be like, yo, and you got white professors out here saying the N-word. But I was like, let me take that out. But I think it's a really like liberating writing that letter, probably for you as well, was very cathartic. It just was like a happy sort of thing, like releasing all of that in the letter. The sad part, Zach, is that a lot of these companies there's so much important information in resignation letters. A lot of companies don't even, like HR departments aren't reviewing letters to see, are all of the employees who are leaving saying the same things, right? Yeah. Letters are just sort of kept in HR somewhere in a file cabinet or online somewhere, but they're not actually doing a lot of things with these letters. But there's so much valuable information that I think companies should be utilizing. They should be examining these letters with a fine-tooth comb and seeing if there's patterns in people's resignation letters. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like that would take some level of intention and analysis and critical thinking that I don't know if they're really trying to do. Like so much of that presumes that they actually care about Black and brown people or just the experience of any employees at all. Let me ask you this. Like, you know, first of all, I do want to talk a little bit about your podcast. How has it been going? Pink Elephant. right?
Yes. The podcast is Dirty Diversity, and that has been going really well. I feel like I'm on season 3, wrapping up season 3 right now, but I just feel like it feels really good to be able to have these conversations on my own terms. I feel like you may feel like that with this podcast.
Yeah.
Where it just feels really nice. I love having audio conversations with people and just sharing my thoughts. And so I really am happy to have that sort of outlet. My podcast is a little different because I think most of my episodes are just me sharing my musings and my thoughts, because I feel like this podcast does such an amazing job of highlighting voices, right? Of people doing this work, of change makers, of corporate leaders, of so many folks. And I think that I really wanted the podcast to be me and my thoughts and my experiences, because to the point you made earlier, I'm not able to share a lot of my experiences. Like in my writing, I don't talk about me or my experiences. And so the podcast serves as a really nice outlet for me to just kind of say, this thing happened while I was consulting, right? And I don't, of course, give the names of companies or clients, but I think it feels really good to have that outlet.
You know, I love Dirty Diversity, and I was thinking about the Pink Elephant newsletter. But I think about like your environment and how they all come together, because like, one, I think any space, and I say this, first of all, for those who don't know, like, you were one of the first people to actually feature Living Corporate on any major publication. And so like,
oh, yay.
Yeah. Like that was back in 2019, I think. I just really,
yes. Oh, I forgot. Yes. So I think it was a list of the best podcast or the best Black podcasts to listen to.
Yes, right.
And then we did another feature for the show with the Black mental health.
You featured us
professionals.
twice.
I forgot about that first feature, actually.
Yes, the 13 best podcasts to listen to during Black History Month, and you put in parentheses, or any month. And like, I just really appreciate you like giving us space. But what I also realize is, like, after we had connected, but then also before that, like, I was engaging your content, and like, really, Dr. Gassam, any space where you're able to speak frankly, that's content that we need. So like, I just want you to know that like, you're needed, you're heard, you're appreciated. I'm excited about the work that you've done both in the Ivory and outside. I'm excited to like continue to hear and experience your voice as you continue to step away from white-centric spaces or spaces that make you feel unsafe, spaces where you can be as candid as you'd like. That's what we really need. Especially as we look at like just the future of work, and we have like these newer young professionals coming into the space. They're not really going to be interested in the veneer of gentility and like just all of the niceties and stuff. They're looking for direct, candid leadership. They're looking for authentic spaces. And for those reasons, I'm confident that your podcast and wherever it goes, as well as your newsletter and wherever it goes, is going to be critical for us in this next phase of work. So it's me giving you your flowers. I really appreciate all of your work.
Thank you so much, Zach. I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad that I'm grateful to be in a position to amplify our voices, because I think that that's one of the things I love about this podcast is it's amplifying us and our voices. And I think that there aren't a lot of places where you see that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that I just love what this podcast and what this platform, rather, not really just your podcast, what it's blossomed into. Because even like 3 years ago, I think about 3 years ago, living corporate and now, and it's like blossomed into something really beautiful that was so needed before George Floyd, and it's still needed much more now in 2022 and moving on. So I can really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, Dr. Gassam, we're going to make sure to put your links in the show notes. We'll make sure that everyone checks out Dirty Diversity Podcast. Either they subscribe to the Pink Elephant newsletter. Is there anywhere else folks need to be looking for you and finding you?
No. So I live on LinkedIn because Instagram be acting shady. When you talk about, I used to talk a lot in my content about white supremacy and anti-Blackness. And I think some of my content, I feel like the algorithm is not a fan of on Instagram. So it's kind of discouraged me a little bit, but I'm on LinkedIn a lot more. So if you're on LinkedIn or Instagram, feel free to connect. I love meeting new people. And you can search the Dirty Diversity Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and you'll find it and it'll pop up.
I love it. Dr. Gassam, again, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you've done, like selfishly, just for Living Corporate and for me. Thank you for the work that you do to center and amplify our voices, our experiences. Thank you for your courage. We consider you a friend of the show. You're welcome back anytime. Don't be a stranger. And if you ever have some smoke you want to let off, you want to blast somebody or start some beef, you come over here. I will play the background music. I'm here.
I love it. You'll play the ether beat.
I will.
I love that. I'm going to keep that in mind, though.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Zach.
Peace. And we're back. Listen, you don't want to go nowhere. The content we got lined up for y'all in 2023 is so exciting, right? I'm over here looking at our schedule between now and the end of February. Oh my goodness. You've already seen a couple of, if you follow me on Twitter, you follow Living Corporate on Twitter, again, links in the show notes, you'll see. I'll every now and then I'll slip up and I'll at somebody because they need to be surprised, but I be getting too excited, so I'll be shouting people out. So you'll see, but if you don't, that's all the better. It's a good surprise for you. Make sure that you follow us everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Google us, Google Living Corporate, and just follow whatever pops up. You know what I'm saying? Check out the website if you haven't already. Soon, we're going to be relaunching with some new dope features to make it even more accessible, more dynamic, more personal for you. We're going to make the job board. But I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, make sure you continue to follow Living Corporate. Tell your friends about it. If you are a historically marginalized person, again, Black or brown person, queer, differently able, visible or invisible, first generation, or if you're an aspirational ally, meaning you're a white person or a white passing person, or a person who again lives as a white person, and you're seeking to understand how to better show up as an ally. You're a man, you're someone in some type of majority group. Guess what? We all exist in some type of privileged space. If you're looking to be a better ally in these spaces to create more equitable places to work, Living Corporate is a resource for you. And if you know people who need this type of education, again, this passive education, through just having real, authentic conversations, share this with somebody. Share this with your network. Share this with your friends, your neighbor, your coworker, your supervisor, your direct report. Share this with your skip level. Share it with your boss's boss. You know what I'm saying? In the meantime, make sure you cop some merch. You know what I mean? We got hoodies on deck. All right. livingcorporate.shop. You know what I mean? And, just rock with us. And again, I don't even know if I could be more grateful. I'm confident I could be, but just know I am very thankful. And I share this, and I do speak on behalf of the network to say thank you. Until next time, y'all, love, peace, and growth in 2023. Catch y'all soon. Peace.
Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.